There are moments in life when destiny seems to have a very particular sense of humor. Moments when the universe puts two people face to face in such an unlikely way that you wonder if there isn't something greater orchestrating it all. I'm Marina Silva, a nurse for over 12 years, and that Thursday night, I witnessed one of those encounters that seem impossible, but happen exactly when they need to. It was almost 11 p.m. when the ambulance arrived with a patient in critical condition. The movement in the emergency room at St. Luke's Hospital was intense, as it always is on nights in the city, but something about that call was different. I was finishing organizing the medical charts when I heard the characteristic sound of the automatic doors opening urgently, followed by the firm voice of the paramedics announcing multiple trauma, polytrauma patient, unstable vital signs. I ran to the emergency room, and what I saw made me stop for a second. In the center of all that confusion, on the gurney, was a man I recognized immediately. Not personally, but from newspaper pages, television reports, billboards spread throughout the city. Edward Morrison, the real estate magnate, the man who had built half of the commercial buildings downtown, the one who was constantly photographed at charity galas and high society events. But there, on that gurney, he wasn't any of that. He was just a 52-year-old man, unconscious, with his face covered in blood, his Armani suit torn and dirty, his body broken by an accident that, by the paramedics' accounts, had been brutal. A head-on collision downtown, the driver of the other vehicle also in critical condition, witnesses saying Edward's car had run the red light. I started working automatically, checking his vital signs, connecting the monitors, preparing IV access. My years of experience have taught me that in the emergency room there is no rich or poor, famous or anonymous. There is only the patient and the fight for life. And Edward Morrison was fighting, even unconscious. His heart beat irregularly, blood pressure dropping dangerously, signs of internal bleeding evident. That's when Dr. Gabriel Ferreira entered the room. I knew him well. We'd worked together for almost 3 years. Gabriel was one of the best cardiothoracic surgeons at the hospital. Dedicated, meticulous. The kind of doctor who would spend hours studying each case before entering the operating room. He was 38 years old, had a brilliant career ahead, and a personal history that few knew, but that I had discovered in conversations during long and silent shifts. When Gabriel approached the gurney and saw the patient's face, he stopped. He simply stopped. I saw the color drain from his face, saw his hands tremble slightly before he closed them into fists, saw something pass through his eyes that I had never seen before. It was hatred. Pure, visceral hatred. The kind of feeling you can't completely hide, no matter how professional you are. "Dr. Gabriel?" I called, touching his arm. "We need to act fast. He has internal bleeding, probably in the spleen and liver. Blood pressure is dropping." Gabriel didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on Edward Morrison's unconscious face. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, low and loaded with something dark, he said, "I know who this man is." "Everyone knows who he is, doctor," I replied, checking the monitors again. The pressure was in free fall. "But now he's our patient, and he's dying. We need to take him to the operating room immediately." Gabriel took a deep breath, and I saw the conflict on his face. The medical oath, the years of training, professional ethics, all of it fighting against something much older and more painful. Finally, he nodded and began giving orders, his voice recovering its usual firmness, but his eyes still carrying that shadow. We prepared Edward for surgery in record time. While the team moved around the gurney, Gabriel stepped away for a moment. I followed him to the corridor. "Doctor, what's happening? Why did you react that way when you saw the patient?" Gabriel looked at me, and for the first time in the 3 years we'd worked together, I saw tears threatening to form in his eyes. "Marina," he said, his voice trembling. this man destroyed my family. 15 years ago, he bought the land where my father had a small construction company. He used legal trickery, bribery, intimidation. My father lost everything. 2 months later, he had a heart attack and died. My mother never recovered, lived her last years in depression. She passed away last year. I felt my heart tighten. I knew part of Gabriel's story, knew he had lost his parents, but I never imagined Edward Morrison was involved. "And now you need to save him," I whispered, understanding the magnitude of what was happening. "Now I need to choose," Gabriel corrected, his voice loaded with pain. "Choose between being the doctor I swore to be, or being the son who wants justice for what he did to my family." In that moment, I understood I was about to witness something much bigger than a simple surgery. I was about to see a man decide who he really was, at the most crucial moment of his professional life. The monitor's alarm brought us back to reality. Edward was getting worse rapidly. There was no more time for doubts or memories. His life was in Gabriel's hands, and Gabriel's soul was being tested in a way I never imagined possible. We ran back to the emergency room. Edward's blood pressure had dropped even more, and vital signs showed we were losing precious time. Gabriel took command with a determination that seemed forced, but it was there. He began giving orders to prepare the operating room, requested blood type, asked for the anesthesia team to be contacted immediately. As we moved Edward through the corridor toward the operating room, I saw Gabriel observing the face of the man who had destroyed his family. It was a complex expression, a mixture of medical professionalism and something much more human, much more painful. I knew Gabriel well enough to know he was fighting a monumental internal battle. In the locker room, as we prepared for surgery, Gabriel rested his hands on the sink and stared at his own reflection in the mirror. I approached him, washing my hands beside him. "Doctor, you don't have to do this. We can call Dr. Augustine, he's on call." Gabriel shook his head slowly. "No, Marina. Dr. Augustine is in another complex surgery. It'll take at least 3 more hours. Edward doesn't have 3 hours. He has maybe 40 minutes, at most an hour." "But you can ask another surgeon to take over," I insisted, worried not only about Edward, but about what this situation was doing to Gabriel. "And what do I say?" Gabriel turned to me, his voice loaded with frustration and pain. "That I can't operate because the patient ruined my family? That part of me wants to let him die on that table? That there's this voice inside my head saying it would be justice, that it would be the universe collecting his debt?" The silence between us was heavy. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Gabriel, you're one of the best surgeons I've ever known, not because your hands are skilled, but because you care. You care about every life that passes through your hands. I remember Mr. Anthony, that patient with no family you operated on last year. You stayed with him 3 nights in a row, even off your shift, because you knew he had no one. You're that person, Gabriel. Don't let the pain of the past destroy who you've built yourself to be." Gabriel closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, there was a different resolution there. "Thank you, Marina. You always know what to say." We entered the operating room. Edward was already positioned on the table, completely anesthetized, the monitors beeping his irregular rhythm of life. The team was ready, everyone looking at Gabriel, waiting for his orders. He positioned himself, his hands steady now, the surgeon taking control over the wounded son. "Let's begin," Gabriel announced, his voice professional and confident. "Median incision. Marina, prepare suction. We're going to have a lot of blood." The surgery began, and I watched Gabriel work with the precision that always characterized him. His hands moved confidently, each cut calculated, each movement deliberate. But I also saw the tension in his shoulders, the sweat that wasn't just from physical effort, the occasional clenching of his jaw when he looked at Edward's face. Half an hour into the surgery, we found the first serious problem. The spleen was severely damaged, bleeding profusely. "I'm going to have to remove the spleen," Gabriel announced. "Marina, more gauze. We need to control this bleeding before he goes into shock." We worked quickly, the team synchronized like an orchestra. But then came the second problem, this one much more serious. The liver was also injured, a deep cut probably caused by a fractured rib. It was a complicated injury, the kind that could kill a patient even in the hands of the best surgeons. I saw Gabriel stop for a moment, just a second, looking at that injury. And in that second, I understood what was going through his mind. How easy it would be to make a small mistake, a slip of the hand, poorly done suture. How simple it would be to let fate follow its course. How tempting it would be to allow Edward Morrison to pay for his crimes in a way no court ever managed. But then Gabriel took a deep breath and began working on the liver injury with a dedication that bordered on obsession. His hands moved with even greater precision, as if each suture were a declaration, as if each stitch were an affirmation of who he chose to be. "Smaller scalpel," he requested. "We're going to do continuous suture here. We need to restore vascular integrity without compromising surrounding parenchyma. You know, there's a moment in each life when you really discover who a person is. It's not in good moments, not when everything is easy. It's when everything is difficult, when it would be so simple to give up, when no one would judge if you failed." And there, in that operating room, with his hands literally inside the body of the man who had destroyed his family, Gabriel was showing who he really was. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Gabriel placed the last stitch. "Closure," he announced, his voice exhausted but firm. "He's going to survive. He'll need intensive care for the next 48 hours, but vital organs are preserved. He'll live." When we left the operating room, Gabriel removed his mask, and I saw silent tears running down his face. They weren't tears of joy, nor of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of a man who had faced his darkest demons and chosen the light. Before I could say anything, I want to pause here to tell you something. You know, working in the hospital all these years, I've seen many difficult stories, many moments that test people's humanity. And every time I share these stories here with you, I feel like we're building something special together. A community of people who believe in goodness, even when the world seems dark. If you're following this channel, if these stories touch your heart like they touch mine, I invite you to be part of this family. Subscribe here, turn on notification bells, because every week I bring another story that will move your heart, that will make you believe a little more in humanity. And tell me here in the comments, have you ever had to choose between doing what's right and doing what would be easier? Have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Your experiences matter, and I read every comment. Let's continue this conversation, because together, we are stronger. Gabriel went straight to the locker room after surgery, and I followed him. He was sitting on the bench, still in surgical uniform, his face in his hands. When he saw me, he raised his red eyes. I almost let him die, Marina. For a second, I really thought about doing it. I sat beside him, without saying anything initially, just being present. Sometimes, the best thing we can do for someone is simply be there, be witness to their pain, validate that what they're feeling is real and important. But you didn't, I finally responded. You chose to save his life, even knowing everything he did. You know what's strangest? Gabriel looked at his own hands, as if he didn't recognize them. During surgery, while I was working to keep that man alive, I started thinking about my father. I thought about who he was, the values he tried to teach me. My father was a good man, Marina. Honest, hardworking, with integrity. When Edward destroyed his business, my father could have taken revenge in several ways. He had friends, connections, knew secrets about many powerful people. But he didn't do any of that. Why not? I asked gently. Because he said, revenge is like poison. You think you're hurting your enemy, but actually you're killing yourself inside. He said forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about yourself, about not letting anger consume who you are. Gabriel gave a bitter laugh. I thought they were just nice words, you know? Those things parents say but don't have much practical meaning. But today, with my hands inside that man's body, I understood exactly what my father meant. We were silent for a moment. Then Gabriel continued. If I had let Edward die, even if just through omission, through a small purposeful error, I would have killed my father again. I would have destroyed everything he tried to teach me, all the values he lived by. And I would have destroyed myself in the process. You honored your father today, I said, feeling my own voice catch, in the hardest way possible, but also the most beautiful. At that moment, the locker room door opened and Dr. Helena, our clinical director, entered. Gabriel, I need to talk to you. It's about patient Edward Morrison. I saw Gabriel immediately stiffen. Is he okay? Were there any post-operative complications? No, he's stable in ICU, Doctor, Helena replied, but her expression was serious. But a lawyer from his family just arrived, and he's asking questions about who was the surgeon in charge. Apparently, they did a quick search and discovered your history with the Morrison family. Blood drained from Gabriel's face. And now? Now. Dr. Helena approached and placed her hand on his shoulder. Now you go home to rest, because you did exceptional work and saved the life of a man who was almost dead when he arrived. I spoke with the entire team that was in the operating room. Everyone said the same thing. It was one of the most technically perfect surgeries they've ever seen. Marina here also confirmed. But what about the lawyer? Gabriel asked, worried. What if they try to claim I deliberately put his life at risk? That I shouldn't have operated because of the history? Dr. Helena smiled, but it was a hard smile. Let them try. We have all the records, all protocols followed to the letter, witnesses to your competence, and more importantly, we have a living patient who should be dead. There's no case here, Gabriel. There's only a brilliant surgeon who put his professional ethics above his personal issues. After Dr. Helena left, Gabriel finally stood up. I'm going to see how he is, before going home. Are you sure? I asked. You don't have to do this. I know, he replied. But I need to see. I need to make sure he'll be okay. We went together to the ICU. Edward was connected to various devices, his breathing assisted by mechanical ventilation, his body motionless but vital signs stable. We stood there, on the other side of the glass, watching that man who represented so much to Gabriel. You know what I realized during surgery? Gabriel said, without taking his eyes off Edward. When you open a person, when you see the heart beating, the lungs expanding, that whole system working to maintain life, you realize there's no difference between us. Rich, poor, good, bad. We're all just flesh and blood trying to survive. We're all vulnerable. We're all human. It's a difficult lesson to learn, I commented. The hardest of my life, Gabriel agreed, but maybe the most important. At that moment, I saw something happen to Gabriel. It was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He was no longer carrying the hatred, the anger, the desire for revenge. Not that he had completely forgiven Edward, not that everything was resolved, but he had chosen not to let that man destroy his life a second time. He had chosen to be bigger than his pain. And I, as a nurse, as someone who witnesses human fragility every day, felt deep respect for that choice. Because it's easy to be good when it costs nothing. True character is revealed when being good means giving up revenge, when doing right means helping those who hurt you. 3 days later, Edward Morrison woke up. I was on shift when it happened, and I was one of the first people he saw when he opened his eyes, disoriented and confused. It took me a few minutes explaining where he was, what had happened, the accident, the emergency surgery. Who was my surgeon? He asked, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube we had removed just a few hours earlier. Dr. Gabriel Ferreira, I replied, carefully observing his reaction. "One of our best cardiothoracic surgeons." I saw something pass across Edward's face, a recognition, perhaps a memory. "Ferreira," he repeated slowly. "That name, Ferreira." "Yes, Mr. Morrison. Dr. Gabriel Ferreira saved your life. You had severe injuries, lost a lot of blood. The surgery lasted almost 3 hours." Edward closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there were tears there. "I know that name. Ferreira Construction. It was a company that I..." He stopped, unable to continue. "It was a company that belonged to his father." I finished the sentence gently. "Yes, Dr. Gabriel knows who you are." The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Edward turned his face to the side, and I saw tears running down his face. They weren't tears of physical pain, but of something much deeper. Recognition, perhaps. Remorse, certainly. "He saved my life," Edward whispered, more to himself than to me. "After everything I did to his family, he saved my life." "He's a good doctor," I said simply, "and an even better man." In the following days, I monitored Edward's recovery. He was a model patient, following all instructions, never complaining, always polite with the staff. But there was a change in him, something in his eyes, a quietness that wasn't there before. It was as if the accident and surgery had broken something in him, not physically, but on a much deeper level. Gabriel avoided Edward during the first days, keeping professional but distant, checking charts but not making bedside visits. But 1 week after surgery, when Edward was well enough to be transferred to a regular room, Gabriel finally entered for a follow-up consultation. I was there, checking Edward's vital signs when Gabriel entered. The two men looked at each other, and the air in the room became dense with everything that wasn't being said. Finally, Edward spoke first. "Dr. Ferreira." His voice was low but clear. "I recognize you. You look a lot like your father." Gabriel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was controlled but loaded with emotion. "I came to check your recovery. Tests show you're progressing well. If you continue like this, you can be discharged in 1 more week." "Doctor," Edward interrupted, "I need to say something. I need you to know that..." He stopped, struggling with the words. "What I did to your father was unforgivable. I used my power, my money, my influence to destroy a good man, just because I wanted that property. I didn't need to do it that way. I could have made a fair offer, could have negotiated in good faith, but I chose the cruelest path because I could." Gabriel remained silent, his hands closed into fists at his sides. "I've spent recent years," Edward continued, "building an empire, earning more money than I could ever spend, being admired and respected. But when I was on that operating table, when everything I had built didn't matter anymore, when it was just me and death, I understood that none of it meant anything. And then you, the son of the man I destroyed, you saved me." "I did my job," Gabriel said, his voice tense. "I took an oath." "You did much more than that," Edward insisted. "You could have let me die. No one would know. No one would blame you. But you chose to save me. And now I have to live with that. I have to live knowing I owe my life to the son of the man I destroyed." Gabriel finally looked directly at Edward. "I didn't save your life for you," he said calmly. "I saved it because that's who I am. Because my father taught me to be better than my anger, bigger than my desire for revenge. I saved your life because I'm a doctor, and because respecting life is the least I can do to honor my father." Edward nodded slowly, tears flowing freely now. "Your father raised an extraordinary man." "Yes," Gabriel agreed, his own voice catching. "He did, and I hope, every day, to be worthy of him." Gabriel left the room without saying anything more. I followed him to the corridor. He was leaning against the wall, breathing deeply, processing everything. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I am," he replied. And this time, I completely believed him. For the first time in 15 years, I really am okay. 2 weeks later, I received news that surprised me. Edward Morrison had created a foundation in his name to help small business owners who lost everything because of abusive corporate practices. It didn't erase what he had done in the past, didn't bring Gabriel's father back, but it was a start. It was a man trying to fix part of the damage he had caused. Gabriel never commented on the foundation, but I saw a small smile on his face when he read the news in the newspaper. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. But it was proof that even in the darkest moments, when hatred seems justified and revenge seems deserved, choosing kindness can plant seeds of change. If this story touched your heart in any way, know that you're not alone. We all carry our own battles, our fears, our doubts, but that's exactly why stories like this need to be told and heard. If you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope, share this video. Sometimes one story can be the light someone needs to keep going. And if you have your own story to tell, leave it here in the comments. This space is ours, it's safe, and every word matters. I read every comment, and I know many of you also read and find strength in each other's experiences. See you in the next video with another story that will move your heart. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and remember, life is always worth it. A warm hug, and until next time.